Paul Heyman just committed the most disgusting act of betrayal in WWE history. What happened at SmackDown wasn't just shocking, it was a complete destruction of everything wrestling fans thought they knew about loyalty, friendship, and the very foundations of sports entertainment. And if you think you've seen controversial alliances before, think again, because Paul Heyman introducing Brock Lesnar as the newest member of Seth Rollins Vision isn't just unexpected, it's a nuclear bomb that's going to leave the entire WWE landscape in absolute ruins. But here's the question that should make every wrestling fan's blood boil: how can WWE expect us to believe that Paul Heyman, the man who built his entire career on loyalty to monsters and killers, would betray everything he stands for to join Seth Rollins' corporate vision of sports entertainment? Because what happened on SmackDown isn't just bad storytelling, it's WWE spitting in the face of decades of wrestling history and expecting us to just accept it. Hashtag the moment that made wrestling fans sick. Let me paint you the picture of the most disgusting betrayal in modern wrestling history, because what Paul Heyman did on SmackDown wasn't just turning his back on Roman Reigns, it was turning his back on everything that made him a legend in this business. Picture this: Seth Rollins is in the ring, delivering another one of his self-righteous promos about how his vision is going to revolutionize WWE and save sports entertainment from itself. The crowd is already getting restless because, let's be honest, Seth's Monday Night Messiah complex has been played out for years. But then Paul Heyman's music hits. The crowd explodes because they think they're about to see Paul Heyman shut down Seth's corporate nonsense with the kind of passionate, authentic promo that only the greatest talker in wrestling history can deliver. Everyone expects Heyman to tear Seth apart for his pretentious vision and his holier-than-thou attitude. Instead, Paul Heyman walks to that ring and does something that made thousands of wrestling fans in attendance genuinely angry. He shakes Seth Rollins' hand and grabs that microphone to announce that he's joining the Vision. But wait, it gets worse. Hashtag the introduction that broke wrestling. Paul Heyman, the man who discovered CM Punk, who managed Stone Cold Steve Austin, who created ECW, who guided Brock Lesnar to legendary status, who stood by Roman Reigns through thick and thin, this man gets on that microphone and says the words that should make every wrestling purist furious: "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman, and I am no longer the special counsel to Roman Reigns. I am no longer the advocate for Brock Lesnar's individual success. Tonight, I stand before you as a believer in Seth Rollins' vision for the future of sports entertainment." The crowd's reaction was immediate hatred. Not the good kind of wrestling heat, the genuine disgust that comes from watching something you love being destroyed in front of your eyes. But Heyman wasn't finished destroying his legacy. And to prove my commitment to this vision, to prove that the future of WWE requires embracing change rather than clinging to the past, I want to introduce you to someone who shares Seth's revolutionary perspective on what sports entertainment can become. The pause that followed was sickening because everyone in that arena knew what was coming, but nobody wanted to believe it. Ladies and gentlemen, Brock Lesnar. Hashtag Brock Lesnar's entrance that killed wrestling's soul. When Brock Lesnar's music hit, the reaction wasn't excitement, it was betrayal. The crowd wasn't cheering for the return of the Beast incarnate, they were witnessing the complete destruction of one of wrestling's most authentic partnerships. Brock walked to that ring with a look on his face that wrestling fans had never seen before. Not the intense focus of a killer preparing for war. Not the cocky smirk of a dominant champion. This was Brock Lesnar looking satisfied, comfortable, like he was exactly where he wanted to be. And that's what made it so disgusting. For years, Brock Lesnar represented something pure in wrestling: raw power, legitimate athletic ability, and a complete lack of interest in politics or corporate BS. Brock was the guy who showed up, destroyed whoever was put in front of him, and left. He was real in a world full of manufactured personalities. But when he entered that ring and stood next to Seth Rollins, when he nodded approvingly at Paul Heyman's speech about evolution and the future of sports entertainment, Brock became everything that real wrestling fans hate about modern WWE: corporate, calculated, and completely fake. Hashtag Seth Rollins' sickening victory speech. With Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar flanking him, Seth Rollins grabbed the microphone and delivered a promo that should make every wrestling fan furious about the current direction of WWE. "This is what evolution looks like," Seth said with that smug smile that makes you want to throw something at your TV screen. "This is what happens when the past finally recognizes that the future has arrived." Paul Heyman, the greatest manager in wrestling history, understands that clinging to old loyalties and outdated relationships only holds everyone back. The crowd was booing relentlessly, but Seth continued his corporate propaganda. Brock Lesnar, the most dominant force in sports entertainment, understands that individual achievement means nothing without being part of something bigger, something more significant, something that can change the entire landscape of WWE. But here's the part that made wrestling fans sick to their stomachs. Together, we represent the complete package that WWE needs to move forward. Brock provides the raw power and legitimate athletic credibility. Paul provides the strategic mind and promotional genius. I provide the vision and leadership that will guide WWE into its next golden age. Hashtag the betrayal that destroyed 2 decades of history. To understand just how disgusting this alliance is, you need to understand the history that WWE just completely destroyed for the sake of a shocking moment that nobody wanted to see. Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar's relationship began in 2002 when Heyman became Brock's advocate, helping him navigate the political landscape of WWE while maintaining his authentic intensity. For over 20 years, through Brock's UFC career, through multiple WWE returns, through championship reigns and legendary matches, Paul Heyman was the one constant in Brock's professional wrestling life. This wasn't just a business relationship, it was a partnership built on genuine respect and shared understanding of what wrestling should be. Paul understood that Brock's value came from his authenticity, his refusal to conform to corporate expectations, his commitment to being exactly what he was, a legitimate fighter who happened to be in professional wrestling. Brock understood that Paul's genius came from his ability to present authentic personalities in compelling ways, to create storylines that felt real because they were rooted in genuine character motivations rather than corporate mandates. Together, they created some of the most memorable moments in modern wrestling history because they represented something real in an increasingly artificial environment. And WWE just destroyed all of that for a cheap shock that nobody wanted. ## the Roman Reigns situation that makes this even worse, but the betrayal goes even deeper when you consider what this means for Roman Reigns and the bloodline storyline that has been central to WWE programming for years. Paul Heyman has been Roman's special counsel since 2020, helping him evolve from the most hated wrestler in WWE into the most compelling character the company has produced in years. The relationship between Paul and Roman felt authentic because it was built on mutual respect and genuine character development. Paul saw something in Roman that nobody else recognized, the potential to be a truly great heel character who could carry WWE programming for years. Roman recognized that Paul's guidance could help him become something more than just another corporate-pushed superstar. Their partnership produced the best work of both men's careers. Roman's heel turn and subsequent championship reign was universally praised by critics and fans alike. Paul's role as special counsel allowed him to showcase his legendary promo skills while contributing to genuinely compelling television. But now WWE expects us to believe that Paul would abandon this successful, creatively fulfilling partnership to join Seth Rollins' pretentious corporate vision? They expect us to believe that Paul Heyman, who spent years helping Roman become the head of the table, would just walk away from the bloodline to become part of Seth's manufactured revolution? It's insulting to every wrestling fan's intelligence. ## the locker room reaction that proves this is wrong. According to backstage sources, the reaction to Paul Heyman's betrayal within the WWE locker room has been overwhelmingly negative. Wrestlers who have worked with Paul for years are expressing genuine disappointment and confusion about his decision to align with Seth Rollins. Multiple wrestlers have reportedly approached Paul privately to ask if he's being coerced or pressured into this storyline, because nobody who knows him believes he would willingly abandon his authentic relationships for Seth's corporate BS. Even wrestlers who aren't directly involved in the storyline are expressing concern that this alliance represents WWE's willingness to sacrifice authentic character development for cheap shock value that doesn't serve anyone's long-term interests. But perhaps most tellingly, wrestlers who have been critical of Seth's Vision storyline are now being more vocal about their concerns, arguing that bringing Paul and Brock into the fold proves that the Vision is nothing more than corporate propaganda designed to make Seth look more important than he actually is. ## the historical context that makes this unforgivable. Paul Heyman's career has been defined by his commitment to authentic storytelling and genuine character development. From his early days in WCW to his legendary run as the creative force behind ECW, Paul has always been willing to sacrifice easy success for authentic creative vision. ECW succeeded because Paul refused to compromise his vision for corporate expectations. His work with Stone Cold Steve Austin was legendary because he understood that authentic characters resonate more deeply than manufactured personalities. His partnership with CM Punk produced some of the greatest promos in wrestling history because both men were committed to genuine expression rather than corporate talking points. Even his work as Brock Lesnar's advocate was successful because he presented Brock authentically rather than trying to make him conform to typical WWE character templates. Throughout his entire career, Paul Heyman has been the guy who stands up to corporate interference, who fights for creative integrity, who refuses to sell out authentic vision for easy money. And now WWE wants us to believe that this man, this legend, would voluntarily join the most corporate, most manufactured, most artificial storyline in modern WWE history? It's not just bad booking, it's character assassination. ## the Brock Lesnar dimension that makes no sense. Brock Lesnar's appeal has always been his authenticity. He's never been the guy who plays politics, who joins stables, who becomes part of corporate storylines. Brock's entire WWE persona is built on the fact that he's above all the BS that dominates modern sports entertainment. Brock shows up, fights, wins, and leaves. He doesn't need allies because he's too dominant to require help. He doesn't need management because his results speak for themselves. He doesn't need to be part of anyone's vision because he is the vision, pure, uncompromising excellence. The idea that Brock would voluntarily become part of Seth Rollins' corporate stable goes against everything that makes Brock Lesnar compelling as a performer. It reduces him from a unique, autonomous force to just another member of someone else's group. Worse, it associates him with the kind of pretentious, self-important storytelling that represents everything wrong with modern WWE. Brock's value comes from being different from the typical WWE product, not from being incorporated into it. ## the Seth Rollins problem. That this makes worse. Seth Rollins Vision storyline has been problematic from the beginning because it's built on the premise that Seth is some kind of revolutionary thinker who understands wrestling better than everyone else. But Seth's vision has never been clearly articulated beyond generic corporate talking points about evolution and the future of sports entertainment. Adding Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar to this storyline doesn't make Seth look more important or visionary, it makes it obvious that WWE knows the storyline isn't working and they're desperately trying to prop it up with established stars. If Seth's vision was genuinely compelling, it wouldn't need the credibility that comes from Paul Heyman's legendary status or Brock Lesnar's dominant reputation. The fact that WWE feels the need to add these elements proves that the storyline lacks the authentic foundation necessary for long-term success. Worse, having Paul and Brock validate Seth's vision makes them look weak and compromised rather than making Seth look strong and visionary. It's backward storytelling that hurts everyone involved. ## the fan reaction. That WWE is ignoring the fan reaction to this alliance has been overwhelmingly negative, and not in a good way that generates heat and interest. This is the bad kind of negative reaction that comes from fans feeling insulted and disrespected by creative decisions that don't make sense. Social media has been flooded with criticism from longtime wrestling fans who feel like WWE is destroying beloved characters for the sake of cheap shock value. The consensus seems to be that this storyline sacrifices everything that makes Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar special for a momentary surprise that doesn't benefit anyone. Even casual fans who don't follow wrestling closely enough to understand all the historical context are expressing confusion about why these particular wrestlers would work together. The alliance feels forced and artificial even to people who don't know the full history involved. This widespread negative reaction suggests that WWE has seriously misjudged their audience's investment in these characters and their understanding of what makes them compelling. ## the long-term damage. This will cause. The immediate shock value of this alliance will fade quickly, but the long-term damage to these characters could last for years. Paul Heyman's reputation as an authentic voice in wrestling has been compromised by his association with Seth's corporate storyline. Brock Lesnar's aura of independence and dominance has been diminished by making him part of someone else's group. Most importantly, this storyline has demonstrated WWE's willingness to sacrifice long-term character integrity for short-term shock value, which could make fans less invested in future character development because they know it could be abandoned at any time for a cheap surprise. The relationships and storylines that WWE builds going forward will be viewed with more skepticism because fans have seen that the company is willing to destroy years of character development for momentary impact. ## the alternatives that WWE ignored. There were dozens of better ways to create shocking moments involving Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar that wouldn't have required destroying their established characters and relationships. Paul could have betrayed Roman for Brock, reuniting with his longtime partner while creating genuine heat with the bloodline. This would have been shocking while staying true to both characters' established motivations and histories. Brock could have returned as an independent force targeting multiple storylines, maintaining his autonomous character while creating fresh conflicts throughout the roster. Seth's vision could have been opposed by a Paul Heyman-led faction, creating authentic conflict between corporate vision and traditional wrestling values that would have served both storylines better. Any of these alternatives would have been more respectful to the characters involved and more satisfying to fans who are invested in authentic storytelling. ## the corporate influence that's ruining wrestling. This storyline represents everything that's wrong with modern corporate wrestling entertainment. Instead of allowing characters to develop organically based on their established motivations and relationships, WWE is forcing artificial alliances that serve corporate storytelling needs rather than character authenticity. The decision to have Paul Heyman join Seth's vision feels like it came from a boardroom rather than from understanding what makes these characters compelling. It's the kind of decision that prioritizes immediate shock value over long-term storytelling quality. This corporate approach to character development is exactly what Paul Heyman has spent his career opposing, which makes his participation in this storyline even more disappointing and hypocritical. ## the wrestling purist perspective. From a wrestling purist standpoint, this storyline represents the complete commercialization of authentic wrestling relationships and characters. It demonstrates WWE's willingness to sacrifice the elements that make wrestling special, genuine characters, authentic relationships, and organic storyline development, for manufactured moments designed to generate social media buzz. Wrestling purists invest in characters and storylines because they feel authentic and meaningful. When companies demonstrate that they're willing to abandon authenticity for shock value, it undermines the entire emotional investment that makes wrestling compelling. This storyline tells wrestling purists that their investment in character development and storytelling quality doesn't matter as much as creating viral moments and generating immediate reactions. ## Hashtag the business implications nobody's discussing. While this storyline might generate short-term attention and social media engagement, the long-term business implications could be devastating for WWE's relationship with their most devoted fans. Wrestling fans who are deeply invested in character development and storytelling quality are exactly the fans who buy merchandise, attend live events, and maintain long-term subscriptions to WWE programming. Alienating these fans for the sake of casual attention could damage WWE's most reliable revenue streams. Additionally, this storyline sets a precedent that could make it harder for WWE to build compelling long-term storylines in the future, because fans will be less willing to invest emotionally in character development that could be abandoned at any time. Hashtag the impact on future storytelling. This alliance between Paul Heyman, Brock Lesnar, and Seth Rollins will have lasting effects on how WWE approaches storytelling going forward. It demonstrates that the company is willing to prioritize short-term shock over long-term character integrity, which could influence how writers approach future storylines. Writers might be less inclined to develop deep, authentic character relationships if they know those relationships could be abandoned for cheap shock value at any time. This could lead to more superficial storytelling that doesn't create the kind of emotional investment that makes wrestling truly compelling. Performers might also be less willing to fully commit to character development if they know their work could be undermined by arbitrary creative decisions that don't serve their characters' best interests. Hashtag the international wrestling community's response. Wrestling promotions and fans around the world have been watching WWE's handling of this storyline with interest and concern. Many international wrestling communities pride themselves on prioritizing storytelling quality and character authenticity over shock value and corporate interference. The negative reaction to this storyline from international wrestling communities suggests that WWE's approach doesn't translate well to audiences that prioritize different aspects of wrestling entertainment. This could have implications for WWE's global expansion efforts, as international audiences might be less receptive to programming that prioritizes corporate storytelling over authentic character development. Hashtag the performer development implications. This storyline sends a troubling message to wrestlers in WWE's developmental system about what the company values in terms of character development and storytelling commitment. Young performers might conclude that investing deeply in character authenticity isn't worthwhile if established legends like Paul Heyman can have their characters compromised for storyline convenience. This could lead to more superficial character development throughout WWE's system, as performers focus on being adaptable to any storyline rather than developing authentic, compelling characters that resonate deeply with audiences. The long-term impact on performer development could be significant if WWE continues to prioritize storyline shock over character integrity. Hashtag the media coverage that reveals everything. Mainstream wrestling media coverage of this storyline has been notably mixed, with many respected journalists expressing concern about the long-term implications of sacrificing character authenticity for momentary shock value. Several prominent wrestling writers have published pieces questioning whether the storyline represents a broader shift in WWE's creative philosophy away from character-driven storytelling toward more corporate, manufactured content. The fact that even wrestling media professionals are expressing skepticism about this storyline suggests that the problems go beyond just fan reactions and represent genuine concerns about the direction of wrestling entertainment. Hashtag the historical precedent that should terrify WWE. Wrestling history is full of examples of companies that prioritized short-term shock over long-term character development, and the results have consistently been disastrous for long-term business success. WCW's final years were marked by exactly this kind of arbitrary character destruction and shock value booking that prioritized immediate reactions over storytelling quality. The result was a complete loss of audience investment and eventual company collapse. TNA Wrestling made similar mistakes during their most troubled periods, sacrificing character authenticity for surprising moments that ultimately damaged their relationship with their most devoted fans. WWE's decision to follow the same pattern with beloved characters like Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar suggests they haven't learned from these historical lessons. Hashtag the solution that WWE won't consider. The obvious solution to this storyline disaster would be to acknowledge that the alliance doesn't make sense and find creative ways to dissolve it while restoring the character integrity of everyone involved. Paul Heyman could reveal that his apparent betrayal was actually a long-term strategy to destroy Seth's vision from within. Brock Lesnar could demonstrate that he's been manipulating the situation for his own purposes. Seth could be revealed as more vulnerable and less visionary than he appears. Any of these approaches would allow WWE to maintain some of the shock value while restoring the character authenticity that makes these performers compelling. But WWE's track record suggests they're more likely to double down on this storyline rather than acknowledge its fundamental problems and work to fix them. Hashtag the future that wrestling fans deserve. Wrestling fans deserve better than storylines that sacrifice character authenticity for momentary shock value. They deserve creative teams that understand what makes characters compelling and are committed to developing those characters in ways that feel organic and meaningful. Paul Heyman deserves better than being reduced to a corporate yes-man for Seth Rollins' manufactured vision. Brock Lesnar deserves better than being made into just another member of someone else's stable. Wrestling fans deserve better than watching their emotional investment in these characters be destroyed for cheap surprises. The wrestling industry at its best creates characters and storylines that feel authentic, meaningful, and emotionally resonant. This alliance represents everything that's wrong with modern corporate wrestling entertainment and everything that needs to change for the industry to reach its full potential. What's your reaction to this absolute betrayal? Are you as disgusted as every real wrestling fan should be by Paul Heyman's complete abandonment of everything that made him a legend? Do you think Brock Lesnar has permanently damaged his authenticity by joining Seth's corporate vision? Or do you actually believe this storyline makes sense and serves these characters well? Explode in the comments section and tell us exactly how you feel about WWE's willingness to destroy decades of character development for one cheap shock. Are you done with WWE's corporate BS, or do you think this storyline has potential that we're not seeing? Destroy that like button if you're as angry about this character assassination as every wrestling purist should be. Subscribe to WrestlingNewsCC for continued coverage of WWE's most controversial and disappointing creative decisions, and share this video with every wrestling fan who needs to understand what WWE just did to three of the most important characters in modern sports entertainment. The corporate takeover of authentic wrestling is complete, and Paul Heyman's betrayal is just the beginning of WWE's war against everything that makes wrestling truly special.